when you're on stage and you are putting on a 90-minute set, depending on how much energy output you're doing, you're literally at a gym you're like doing a cardio run for at least, I don't know, an hour or something like that. Certain things, I remember we put a pedometer on one of the artists I was working with, and every show that they were doing, it was equivalent to about 15 miles just in the show. So to have an expectation that you don't have to match a physical endurance to meet the vocal demand is crazy to me. Like, you have to be able to vocal pace your set to keep the endurance level up, or that's, again, you're going to run into issues. So even if you have a 30-minute set, you know, how do you maintain that? And, you know, I talk about this with the party band. I'm like, do you rehearse for your 4 hours that you have up there? Like, are you literally training to be able to do that? Even if it's 3 songs, like, are you keeping that pace up there? You know, because you typically have 3 back-to-backs, you know, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you know, is usually the weekend of the run. So I would say that's a misconception, is that I can just get up there and do it without truly pacing a physical activity around that.
Welcome to the Vocal Lab. I'm Sarah Ramsey, and this show aims to pull back the curtain on the entertainment industry, where veterans give up-and-coming artists some of the information they wish they'd had when they were just starting out. Sort of a music industry primer, if you will. Welcome to the Vocal Lab. I am thrilled to have with me today Mindy Pack, who is a globally recognized voice specialist, innovator, and entrepreneur, whose groundbreaking approach has transformed vocal performance. As a vocalogist and licensed massage therapist specializing in structural integration, Mindy developed her vocal tract reconditioning method to enhance vocal health and endurance. Her revolutionary product, the Voice Straw, is a game changer for singers, actors, and speakers worldwide. Mindy's client roster includes A-list performers like Justin Timberlake, Miley Cyrus, Noah Kahan, Chappell Roan, Sabrina Carpenter, Lil Nas X, The Lumineers, and Brandi Carlile, among so many more. Her clients have graced stages from Broadway to international award shows and viral sensations. She co-founded the Svara Project with Dr. Reena Gupta and collaborates with elite music and medical professionals globally. Beyond her private studios in Salt Lake City and Los Angeles, Mindy's expertise has been featured on CBS Morning News and in upcoming documentaries. She has served as adjunct faculty at Utah Valley University, where she contributes to the commercial music program, and is an affiliate of the National Center for Voice and Speech. Mindy combines a passion for innovation with decades of performance experience, empowering artists to achieve their best.
That's quite the intro.
Thanks for joining me today, Mindy.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here in person and in Vancouver.
Right?
And this is so fun. So yes, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, how you got here, for people who are maybe just meeting you for the first time today?
Yeah. So at first I always wanted to be a singing heart surgeon. So I always thought I love the medical side and I love performing. I started performing when I was 8 years old and just fell in love with the stage. I was one of the lucky ones that never ever really had an issue with my voice, and I always trained and always just had kind of a powerful voice. And when I was 16, I ended up going to Japan for a few weeks. It was kind of like my first professional gig. I left school, went for a few weeks over to Japan to perform, and was like, this is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And so for many years, I performed around the world doing kind of like these party band type things. And then, later 20s, I was like, somebody was like, you should teach privately. Well, probably mid 20s, you should teach privately. I was like, perfect, let's do it. And I thought everybody learned the way I was taught.
Yep.
And I learned very fast that is absolutely not the case. And so I just started going down the rabbit hole of voice training and different methodologies and how things worked, because I always took it for granted. I never had an anatomy course growing up. My coaches never were like, this is what's happening. I just felt it essentially. And so, I went down all these different kind of courses. I went to school. I did the classical program, but I'm not passionate about classical. I can appreciate it. and just thought, okay, I need to stay more on the contemporary side. And then when I had my second son, we had an incident where he had an attempt of kidnapping on him. I got him back. Everything's
Oh my
fine. I love
God.
like everybody, it's kind of like the Gaps story.
Yeah.
But because of that situation, I like obviously completely shut down and I didn't leave my house. But 4 months later, I ended up being vocally injured. But I wasn't singing. I didn't even leave my house. But the stress that I went through, that trauma, manifested itself in my throat. And I remember the first time I kind of left my house after that. I was working in LA and I was at a conference and I had there's a doctor on stage. And I just said, like, something's not right with my voice. Like, are you doing live screenings? He's like, perfect. Do you want to be on stage when we look at it? And at the time I was like, sure. Like,
Yeah.
I just want the free scope, going through it, not realizing what was going to be a catalyst for a lot. But when I went on the stage, he scoped and he was like, well, you have nodules. And for a singer, that's like the death sentence, like what you think. And
it feels like the death
yeah,
sentence.
And at the time, like I didn't really understand a lot of like injury or anything like that. And I was in front of like 300 people, all of my peers, like students. And it like traumatized me because the thing he said to me was, what did you do to yourself to cause that? And I thought, and I was like, what did I do? Well, I didn't do anything. I went through a trial anyway. So I had an amazing coach at the time. His name's Greg Enriquez. He's still my coach. And we kind of did this whole rehab process. And there's many recordings that I have of me sobbing on the piano, like trying to get through it. And I realized at that moment, as I was kind of rehabbing, that I never wanted somebody to feel the way I felt because my teaching community was like judgy about it. I felt so much shame and guilt, but they didn't know that I almost lost my son with a kidnapping. So that then and there, I vowed that I would be the type of coach that I could be there for anybody. And it kind of changed the direction of my career. Instead of teaching young kids and like auditioning things, I went more into the rehabilitation state and went through and I started networking. I became very good friends with Karen Cox, who's like a vocalogist. Her dad's Dr. Ingo Titsa, who is the leading voice scientist. And I just like wormed my way, I guess, into the clinic to watch her and observe everything and just like soak up everything I could about injury. And then went back to school. Became friends with Dr. Titsa, with Ingo, and went to his program to do the certification in voice science. So like, this is how the voice works. This is like pressure, like all the voice nerdy stuff. And it just kind of changed this whole trajectory of where I'm at, which, led into massage therapy school, into the full body connection. And I feel like there's just so much that's still unknown to
Yeah.
learn about the voice and experience about the voice, but it's been a long journey, but it's not done yet. So we'll see what happens.
I think that I am glad that at least among the peers that I interact with, I feel like that perspective is changing, and there are people actively working to change that sense of what did you do to cause your injury? That's not the right pathway. It's not caused by there's so many pathways to injury.
100%. Yeah. And I think that that's something like with the Savara project with Rena that we started, it is an educational company where we can normalize what's happening and have a safe community.
Yeah.
So that people can come together and ask questions and like feel like they're supported versus scared or ashamed, because there's a lot of stuff that you can Google and like people freak out, or even just like movie lines like, oh, you got notes, whatever.
Yeah.
And I always tell people there are very few things we can't bounce back from. Like very, 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 very few things, so it might take long or time or whatever, but a lot of times it's just a situational, thing that's happened and we just have to figure it out.
Yeah. I can obviously it was a very different pathway, and I'm horrified that you went through that with your son. I can only imagine, but I mean, I lost my daughter for 20 minutes once in IKEA and I thought my world had ended. So I can only imagine like
Yeah.
just such an extreme version with your own child.
Yeah. It was intense. And he, but I look at it, I'm like, this traumatic experience ended up being one of the best things that's ever happened to me,
Yeah.
and so there's like a flip of the narrative
Yeah.
of how it is. And, he's fine and he's safe. And,
Yeah.
we just told him about it last year.
Yeah.
And he's like, what? So, yeah. But, it's it is what it is.
But I can relate. Obviously, it was an entirely different experience. But so my mom had Lewy body dementia, and it was a very long process from her diagnosis to her passing. It was about a 10-year process of losing her.
Mm.
And in the earlier couple of years when she was still more present and struggling with the change, I also was struggling with that change. And I went through a period of time. I was teaching at the time. So very similar, where I was like so embarrassed about my own vocal trauma, but I lost my voice constantly. And I was a working singer, like I was playing live all the time, and I would lose my voice all the time. And at the end of the day, after lots of work, getting scoped, there was nothing physically wrong with my voice, but there was, I think that was all tied to the emotional piece of losing my mom, who had been a voice teacher and had been my voice teacher. So there was lots wrapped up in my voice. And so there was lots of undoing of that to get back to a place where I had access to my voice as well. And
100%.
Yeah.
I have like 4 therapists who are on my team.
Yes.
For that very reason. So like whether it's a touring client or rehabilitation, like coming in, because I still work in doctors' offices and stuff where they send people in, especially particularly people who've been diagnosed with MTD.
Mm-hmm.
They'll come for like the body work stuff, but I have a therapist like literally on speed dial in different states. So I could be like, you need to like call and talk this out while you're there. And I've even had a therapist come into the massage session with me.
Yeah.
And like, as I'm going, cause we can feel certain things and have them unwind, like mentally, emotionally unwind while we're physically unwinding.
I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah. It's pretty cool to see the results with it and experience it, and you just have to make sure everybody's comfortable and it's a safe space and that. But like for certain things, we've had it where it's been done at the same time and it's been very powerful.
Wow. And you just used a term for those who don't know, MTD, that's muscle tension dysphonia,
Yes,
which
sorry.
no, that's okay. Absolutely use the term, and then we'll just explain them as well. And do you want to explain a little bit what
so
that is?
MTD is like I think there's 2 things. One, I feel like it's sometimes overdiagnosed on things, but I'm not a doctor, so I'll clarify that. Trust your doctor. But it's a lot of times when the cords are clean, but you have a lot of effort or pain that's going on inside the throat, but the vocal cords are pretty solid looking and clear. So there's no physical injury on that. And you can't figure out, but you have a lot of effortful singing or speaking, a lot of pressure like going into it, and you just can't find freedom essentially.
So in addition to being a vocal coach and a clinical vocalogist, you are a licensed and certified massage therapist specializing in structural integration for voice performers. I have to read this part because I cannot say it properly otherwise.
It's a lot.
Not only do you focus on the technical sound of the voice, but also the full body approach, patterns, and stamina that may affect the ability to perform.
Yep.
Professionals around the globe have stated that the body work and the muscle manipulation that you do as part of your training routine is a game changer and is a crucial piece to vocal maintenance, endurance, and longevity.
Yes.
So do you want to talk a little bit about how you integrate that knowledge into the vocal coaching process? And
So I mean, we have these systems in our body. Everything attaches to something. Like nothing is just free floating. So we have this system in our body called fascia. I call it the Spanx of the body. It pretty much holds everything in place.
Great visual, actually.
She's like, suck it in. And we have, it's connected through everything. So it's kind of like think spider web all the way through. We have multiple planes, essentially like sheets that connect from the bottom of the feet and end in the throat. So if you think of a term called tensegrity, which is with every action, there's a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So if you pull one, if you think of a structure, a wired structure, if you pull one wire, it can manipulate the whole system essentially. So we look at the full body in that area. So from the shoes that you wear to how your hip is positioned to where your ribs are, and nobody's body is completely symmetric or balanced or any of that. But when you have certain repetitive patterns, it can have effects. So you think of from a singer, obviously if they're holding the guitar all the time, the neck of the guitar is up, it's bringing the shoulder up. So like the muscles on the side of the neck might be pulling a certain way, or they have to, when they sing, they have to stretch out a different way in order to help create the sound because of just what's happening in the body. So everybody has kind of a different protocol. So for me, I look at what what shoes they're wearing. Is their arch supported? That's going to be the main thing. Right there. How's it ricocheting up? What's their costuming like? The physicality of it. When you work with A-list artists who are very dynamic on stage, or even musical theater, if like say you're playing the Hunchback of Notre Dame, you have to manipulate your body to be in a certain way, but that's not what is normal in your normal life. So you always have to come back to neutral. So there's one reason. Or if you have somebody who's doing back bends on stage and they're like singing full out while their body's fully contorted, we have to get that body to remember that posturing in the right way, calibrate it, and then also warm up and rehearse in that position so your body knows where that's going at all time. And then afterwards, bring it back to neutral. Other things are people who sing with in-ears all the time, because you're going and moving your jaw around a hard shell in the in-ears, you start manipulating, doing weird things with your jaw and your neck because it's constantly rotating against a hard shell. So I'm massaging inside their ears and like opening everything up and like stretching their tongues and opening up the inside of the jaw and like going all of that, because night after night they have the hard shell in there, and then all of a sudden they start getting where they don't open their mouths a lot.
That had never occurred to me.
Yeah. So there's just a lot that's kind of like in play.
Yeah.
And so it's very user based, I guess. We look at certain patterns that are there. When you have somebody who, like JT, who's on the monolith, and we're singing Mirrors, and he has to sing this high flat sustained where he's on this vertical pitch and like in a harness, like we have to look at that and say like, how do we make this happen? Like to go through. So it's all different strategies based on like what's happening in the show and what their demand is.
You see it often enough now, that business of singing in a harness with different artists, whether it's pop artists or there's going to be a lot of people. I know this episode isn't coming out for a little bit, but there's a lot of people who are going to be real familiar with it from Wicked having
absolutely
come
Cynthia.
out. I know my brother, his band, one of the tours they did a few years back, he was flying out in a harness, and he talked about how much that changes your availability for breathing and how differently you have to breathe in a harness. And he's singing these high screaming, I'm only referencing it because I know from his experience, but he's singing these high screamy rock notes upside down in a harness. And people don't understand how you kind of don't have, like, you have very little actual space to breathe in a harness. So it's the artists like JT and Pink and,
Cynthia, like in her stuff and
all those people, that it's incredibly difficult to sing under those conditions. So working out the how-to and the recovery from.
Yes, is key.
Yeah.
And that's like, it's time. Like, I think a lot of people don't realize, or I mean, in my experience, and this is something that I'm like trying to change as an industry as a whole, with artists that I work with, is that you cannot expect that perfection in 2 weeks rehearsal time.
Right.
Like the artist has to give themselves time to prepare for whatever that demand is months in advance to like lead up to it before you start adding all the other elements of the show. And I don't think, a lot of times it's budget and whatever coming in, but at least one-on-one, you know, like at least with my clients, like when we're getting ready to do something like 4 months prior to starting, we're already going through the set. We're already starting to work these things. We're already starting into the strategy of cardio and body and all of that to build it up, because it's too much to throw on somebody with band, lights, arrangements, wardrobe, you know, stays like the pacing, like, you know, the artist has to advocate for themselves to like get out there and do it. And so it takes time to get that perfection. Otherwise, it will catch up to you.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. Usually that 3-4 weeks in, it will catch up to you. And then you're looking at different arrangements or canceling shows or anything like that. So it's, in my opinion, better to put the prep in for the maintenance of it, for the run, and really have that strategy in place.
Yeah. Is this where your vocal tract reconditioning, is that a different thing, or is that what you would use to prep an artist? I don't actually know what that.
Yeah, that's okay.
Like I've read the terminology, but I don't know what that program.
Yeah, so VTR is pretty much just the body work side of it, just like going through there. So it's more about the manipulation and the physicality of it.
Yeah.
For prepping an artist, you know, it depends on who's on the team and what's looking at stuff. So I'll be looking at all the vocals and talking with the MD. I also talk with the like physical trainer, the choreographer, to see like what's happening, where's it's going. And usually if the choreographer's there, like people make fun of me all the time because they'll be learning the choreography. I'll be back at my table and I'm doing the choreography with them so I can figure out, okay, you got to breathe here, take this word out. Here's your phrasing. And like, I'm literally dancing with the artist in a mirroring position to be like, breathe, take it, take that out, give your background singers this portion. And we're kind of strategizing like where that goes so that it doesn't have, you know, we can still sound like the album, but also feel the support of what needs to happen.
Yeah. This is a thing that I talk to my students about frequently as well, is that when you are recording in the studio, you are going for your ultimate best version of the song. And when you are figuring out how to perform it live, you are figuring out how to get as close as you can in a way that is sustainable for your voice to take on the road and perform night after night. And they're not going to be the same thing. So it's things like, what word do you have to take out? What melody do you have to maybe do a little bit differently? What key do you have to be in? What line do you have to give to the audience to sing? What line do you have to give to your other band members or background singers or whoever you have on stage with you to sing? Those adjustments. I think artists who are working at not necessarily the A-list level, but the up and coming level, don't understand that happens at all of those levels.
100%. Yeah. I say that to my clients too, where I'm just like, okay, sustainability. When you're writing a hit song, for example, I worked with a client and they were trying to do a whole new album, and we had gone through a rehab setting. I've been with them for 5 years. I've done 2 albums and they were like feeling so amazing going into write. And I go, okay, remember, whatever you write, you have to perform. So please be diverse in your keys and don't just write everything at the top of your range for the entire album. Nobody wants to hear the same notes for 2 hours, the same melody and the same key. But you're thinking hit song after hit song. But when you're looking at the compilation of everything, you have to have diversity in that. And so it's funny because they sent me the album after it got done and I started laughing and I'm like, you're an asshole. Like literally you're an asshole. And they just started laughing and he's like, but I did it different. I'm like, oh no, the keys are great. Like you're every which, but you literally wrote some of the hardest melodies. And I just wrote back #job security for me. But any up and cut, like anybody, just be smart about what keys it's in. And just because that's where you wrote it doesn't mean that's the key it has to be in for a live performance. Right. And I've had some artists where, depending on the day and if it's a back-to-back show, they'll be like, hey, we have 4 keys that we can play in. Like their hit songs that they have, we have 4 keys to choose from based on what day, day 3 of a back-to-back or whatever. We can choose where it's at in just these different areas because you just have to be smart.
Yeah.
And most of the time, your audience isn't even going to know.
No.
They lowered the key.
No. there might be, the odd musician in the audience that can pick it out, but those are going to be like 1 in 1,000.
And nobody in the audience is going to care as long as you deliver a powerful, emotional, connected performance. It won't matter if it's 5 notes too low. If you are honest in your delivery, they honestly will not care.
I have my entire career, I'm not sure I have, working in cover bands, I don't know if I have ever done a song in the original key. I mean, maybe the odd one, but because I have a very low voice. So if I am ever singing, I end up singing a lot of male leads because of that. But if I sing female leads, for sure, they are not in the original key.
Yeah.
And even some of the male leads I have to take down because that's just where my voice sits. So
yeah. And it's like, I mean, the singer has to advocate for that.
Yeah.
You know, like I get that there's chord charts and some things are not there, but the singer is the front person of the band. If you have a shitty singer in your band's not going to do well. So not that you have to cater to that, but you at least need to showcase what the singer can do and effectively produce, especially in a cover band. I think cover bands are one of the hardest singing jobs around.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like you have flexibility and like, oh, we're going to do this like super intimate little small ballad. No, it is like a hit after hit after hit after hit. And then it's like 4 hours long. Like, I think cover bands are one of the hardest gigs ever.
I was very grateful because all the bands that I worked in, we all, like everybody in the band sang.
Oh,
everybody
awesome.
in the band sang leads.
Done.
So it would be like a 6-piece band, but I was only singing 3 leads a set.
Done.
That's
Sign
the combo,
up.
right?
I'm like, do you need a 7th member?
Yeah. And the rest of it was like Bee Gees and stuff and like dancing. So
I'll come in. If you can give me 3 songs, I'll come in and I'll wail and I'll like throw down the hard stuff. Then I'll be like, peace.
Yeah. Yeah. It was
that's
the best.
So fun.
All right. Let's talk about the voice straw. Yeah. So how did you identify the need behind developing the tool?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I first met Dr. Titsa and Karen, you know, I had kind of heard about it, but I felt like, I mean, people like laugh because some people knew about it, but I felt like it was very much in academic and in the therapy world. It wasn't really open to the contemporary general public type thing. And I think a lot of people thought it was more for rehabilitation or for an injury. And when I first started hearing about it, I'm like, this is the dumbest thing ever. This is like the biggest gimmick, like a straw, really going through, and like totally like poo-pooed the idea essentially. But I was, you know, it's like, cool, let's try it. When I went back to, you know, because I became very good friends with Dr. Titsa, and I was in his lab a lot. And then he was so gracious because I would like go to his house for dinner all the time or like go into his lab and just like picked his brain. And he just made me feel so comfortable, like where I, you know, because being a private coach outside of academic, it's very intimidating to talk to someone about like what your questions are and get an answer without feeling like I'm asking you the most stupid question ever. And you're going to think I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm doing.
I so understand that.
Yeah. And Ingo was never that way. He would be like, he would sit there and be like, that's an interesting question. And then the way he would explain it back, I'm like, oh, I get it. Like he was so gracious in his, these sessions that I'd just go pick his brain on. And so one day he was like, Mindy, I really want you to come do the vocology certification. And I'm like, I'm not a physicist. I don't do math. Like, no. And he's like, I will help you, but you need to come in and do it because of who I was working with and like just people I was associating with. And he would use me to sing in different examples. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I just, you know, because I was kind of close to him from a contemporary side. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. So I went in, and when I was in the science lab with him and Lynn Maxfield, we were doing the data behind it and like why it's there. And I'm like, oh, I understand why this works now. And like it finally clicked of it's more than just blowing air through a straw, and there's a method behind it. And then I got angry because I was like, why do people not know about this? Like, it's not an end all be all, but it is one of the best tools we can have for setting up the vocal tract configuration. And so I just talked to him and I was like, all right, I think I'm going to like R&D this and like see if we can put something out there. And he was like, great. And so I just, because he's a scientist, I couldn't like have him be a part of it.
Endorse.
Yeah. Cause he
Yeah.
has to like be neutral to everything. But I would consult and be like, okay, here's what I'm thinking. And I would do all, I'd call Karen and we'd do measurements and I'd bring people in. And, the voice straw just kind of birthed itself. And it frustrated me because a lot of people will be like, well, it's a straw. Like, you're going to do a straw and then what? And I'm like, yeah, but then there's the cup with it.
Yeah.
Because when we have the straw and cup combination, we can now articulate and get our body into a muscle memory of how it should feel healthy without all the extra that kind of comes into it. So the voice straw is it is the most complete system
Yeah.
like on the market that has the next step of the strong cup
Yeah.
kind of phonation, with it. And it's a tool that, I mean, all my students have it. Do I use it in every session? No, but it's a tool. It's a fast and effective tool in my toolbox that I use all the time.
Yeah. Well, I use it, like you said, not in every session, not with every student, but, or I do use it typically with every student, but not necessarily every session.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
But and like my SLP was the one, I had no idea that the cups existed. And she was the one that said, we need to get these happening in your voice. So let's talk, because there have been a couple of iterations, right? So this one, for people who are watching,
The
you'll be able to
OG.
see it. People who are listening, we're just going to have like descriptive audio for you. So this is the OG set. Yeah.
Yep.
This one, I have to not drop things on the floor though. This one comes with the 4 straws, the 2 short ones that are the smaller diameter.
Yep. They're like a coffee straw size that you see in videos.
And then one longer one that's the coffee, that same
it's
smaller size.
Yeah, coffee straw diameter, but about 2.5 inches longer.
And what is that? Is that like a 4 millimeter? 5
it's a 3 millimeter.
3 millimeter.
Yeah, inner diameter.
And then the longer one that's like a normal drinking straw, is that a 6?
It's like a 5.5, I think.
There
I don't
we
know.
go.
You're asking me all the numbers, and I'm like, I need my data sheet.
I didn't even think about writing those down, or I would have. But and then
intellectual property right there. Just kidding.
And then the cups, which you can use on their own or with the straw inserted into them.
Yep,
you can use it both ways. And the cool thing about, well, we'll talk about how you use them all together. But the thing about the cups that's so cool is that they
seal around
your mouth, so you can make all the sounds. You can move your mouth and make all of the words, but still have the resistance.
Yeah,
the back pressure.
Yeah, so the straw, essentially, for those who don't know what it is, the straw you have to pick. This is where like it gets very frustrating because some people are just like coffee straw size, like one size fits all, and that is not the case. The inner diameter relates independently to everybody's voice and where you're at in the range and what style of music you're singing.
Yep.
Okay. So like it has to be an interchangeable system because nothing is a one size fits all.
And it can be different on different days.
100%, which is why there's different diameters. So the user needs to understand what healthy back pressure feels like, because then when you're adding too much strain or not enough back pressure. Because what happens is when you shut your mouth down and you're blowing air into the straw, so you can't just have the steady stream of the mouth open. You're blowing the air into the straw. You're getting a back pressure of air that comes into the throat, back down to the vocal cords. So you're getting a pressure above and below the vocal cords. So it's putting it into a perfect kind of configuration. And our goal is to get an even slap of vocal cords. So you're getting the even slap on every single pitch throughout the whole range. For me, this is what I call function. Like we have to have function in order to create the tone and sounds that we want. The straw is not going to work if you're working on falsetto. Like it's not, unless we're going to go with a huge fatty bobo straw type straw, because straw is bringing healthy closure. So depending on what our goal is and what we're trying to do, you have to be able to have different diameters and different structures that are going through it. So yeah. And then, like I said, with the cup, when we add the cup, we're still getting the benefit of what the straw does, but we're able to articulate, create sound, create volume,
Yeah.
and like work a song with the actual vowels and consonants, maintaining the healthy configuration so that it makes it easier and less effort going into it.
And in terms of like how that explanation of what is accomplished with the straw, with the back pressure and everything, you have a fantastic video that's about a minute and a half long that I have linked on my website, and I show to every new student when we start working with straws, because you explain it with graphics more concisely than I am able to make it come out of my mouth. And so it's literally during the session with the client, we watch that video, and it's such a great understanding of how it works. So I will actually link that video in the show notes to this as well, because it's a beautiful, yeah, it just shows it really beautifully how it organizes the vocal folds.
That was a hard animation to
Yeah.
get drawn up.
I bet it was.
To like try and get that pretty concise, but I'm a visual learner. So it's like, I was like, when we started doing this, I'm like, I have to visually show what that is with the explanation, because I think it kind of like seals the deal
Yeah.
of like what's happening.
Yeah.
So
I agree. So then now there's a second iteration. Do you want to show you?
Yeah. So we now have the Voice Straw H2O. So this is the for water therapy.
Mhm.
So based on current research and study that kind of came out, the benefits of what straw phonation in water does as an SOVT exercise, which is semi-occluded vocal tract exercises, which is what like a hum or a lip buzz or a raspberry, like all of those do. There's a varying degrees of like what is most effective.
Yeah.
And based on current study, straw phonation in water is one of the number ones most effective for SOVT work. So we developed an H2O system going through, which this one has 5 straws in it now. And they are all, again, varying degrees, which you can see here. You can see here. But we have a big fatty one, which is, I call lovingly the big kahuna. And this one I love because I use it for cool downs, and I use it for first thing in the morning if I'm like really rough.
Yeah.
Or had a gig the night before, obviously menstruation, crying, anything like that. There's no back pressure, essentially. It's just a good, for a better lack of term, voice massage.
Yeah.
Inside, where you're just getting things to start rumbling. This is always, and this one is one of my favorites for a singer who sings with a lot of tension or a ton of pressure in there. Really weighty singer, because it allows healthy flow to start going. And you're just like, okay, here's how flow starts working and going through. And then we have 2 others. So there's 2 skinny ones that, you'll probably never use independently because they are way too small. They're a 1.5. I can't even do it without water. But it's the additions. So like everything's done by math. So we have a 3.5 and a 2.5 diameter, and you can add and interchange as you need to with them. So like on the OG, you can do 2 straws at one time. You can do the same thing with these. And if we combine the 3.5 and 1.5, it's a 5 millimeter diameter. So you can have it in there. We also have lip positioning, so you don't bite down on the straw or add extra tension. That way it keeps everything nice and relaxed.
That I'm really excited to play with these, because that is one of the things that I struggle with myself with straw work, is having a firm enough closure on the straw that there's no air leaking out around the straw.
Yeah.
Without creating excess tension in my jaw and lips.
Yeah.
So it's that balance. So I'm actually really excited to play with these.
So I call it a lip pillow. I mean, for lack of term, but it just has like an indent. You can just slowly.
Yeah.
You don't bite, you don't everything, and you're not like over puckering trying to get it. So, like the other benefit is this is long enough that you can put it in water without having to bend your neck down and like make different manipulations with that, so you can keep your head straight. And then the other thing I love with water is a lot of times people think when we sing louder, we push a ton more air to create the sound.
Mm.
And when we have water with straw, when I'm doing dynamic training, you actually don't need to use that much air for volume. And so when we blow that much air, all of a sudden the water, like it's a visual cue. You're
Yeah.
getting another biofeedback of how much effort you're using, which a lot of people tend to use too much. Or if we have somebody that has a hard time with closure and they're very, very breathy,
Mhm.
we can visually see like, oh, we need actually some more energy, more into it. And so it's another cue for it. So I love the H2O. Each one has its own purpose.
Mhm.
The OG I just throw in my car and I have it at whim. If I'm like really honing in and doing stuff,
Mhm.
then I love the water. So,
Yeah.
there's a benefit to both, and see what people like. And it comes with the cup too. So you can use the cup with the straw. You just have to remove the mouth pillow and use it. So yeah, it's just pretty simple.
Nice.
Yep. So yeah, so I'm excited. I'll be curious to see what you think about it, because
Yeah.
it's pretty. I mean, I love it. It saved me in Austin when I was in Austin and was having a major allergy reaction and like getting
Yeah.
my voice to start functioning. And like it's my go-to when I'm on the road, and artists, they'll text me at 11. They're like, I'm really rough right now. And I'm like, hey, we'll throw it in. Let me hear what you got. And just do the big kahuna and let's see.
Yeah.
And it's like, it just helps tell me really fast what I'm dealing with, that day.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so fascinating with straw work as a whole, um, how beneficial it is. I mean, part of it is uh, finding our way to singing with more ease and reduced effort and better coordination and all of those things. And also, there's a piece where it actually helps reduce swelling in the folds, which is why it can be so useful as part of a warm down as well, or when you're unwell and or allergies or things like that. Friend of mine who is a teacher was sick because it's that time of year and had laryngitis, and
Mhm.
not from a singing point of view, but I said to her, "Hey, so grab a straw, just whatever." I mean, for her purposes,
Yeah, yeah.
any old drinking straw,
I'm like, go to McDonald's,
right? And
grab
just
some.
do some sirens and do that in the morning before you go to school, and it's going to help and reset through the day if you need to, and it's going to help take the swelling down in your voice. And she texted me the next day and she said, my voice came back.
I love that.
She's like, what is this magic?
I've done it with different, even, well, my husband, for instance, like he's an introvert. Love you, babe. He's an introvert, but he has to present in front of hundreds and thousands of people for his job. And it makes him incredibly nervous. And when he gets nervous, his voice drops down in fry and he's like
Yeah.
down here like that. And I'm like, no. So we put him on a protocol when he like goes up, and he has his own little warm up for speech, which brings his speech up to the optimum pitch, which this is another one. It doesn't have to be just for singers, but
Yeah.
it puts your pitch at its optimum pitch level so that you can lock it in and then be able to be, present however you want to do. So it's just it's a tool that I never thought I would create something like this, and there's so much work that goes into
Yeah.
it.
I can
Like people
only
do not
imagine.
understand like how much work goes into creating and developing a product, especially if you want it to be right.
Yeah.
And go through it. But, it was never made for like ulterior motives except for just to give this as a tool for people who need it, because I was so angry that I didn't have it when I was growing up. So
Yeah.
because it would have changed a lot, I think, for a lot of people. But now it's out there. It's not just academic or like rehab in a clinic setting, and people can do a lot of things. And I'm a voice nerd, so I just love talking about it. So
Yeah. Well, and I think not only is it out there, and not just in clinic settings, but it's out there and like even on socials and stuff. You see A-list artists starting to use the tools very publicly, and it's making it visible for, I think, all levels of artists that,
yeah, you're
oh,
gonna.
this is a tool that we can all access.
Yeah, you'll start seeing it a lot more, hopefully, at the end of or middle of 2025
Excellent.
on some things. But yeah, I mean, I think artists are now talking. Like, I think a while ago, well, I don't know. I think the way artists are talking about their training, they're starting to understand that, like that they don't. How do I say this the right way? They're now talking that it's it's not easy. Like everybody in the audience thinks it's easy. Like
Yeah.
you can just get up there and do it. It's not. These guys are vocal athletes. And I know that term gets used broadly, but they truly are.
Yeah.
When you look at the demand and the expectation and like what they're doing. And so now that they're talking about, I have to do this or I have to do this. And it's more of a like, it's actual work to do it with what I need to do. And that's a narrative that I love seeing this change in, so that people do understand that it's not something that's just, I can wake up in the morning and do it.
Yeah.
Like, it's a when you're on tour, it's an everyday worry. Is my voice there?
Yeah.
Like going through. And so this is just a tool that I know, I have 3 things that I'm like, if you have this, this, and this, I usually can get your voice back pretty quick if we have it. And the voice draw is one of them.
Mm-hmm. So that sort of takes us to the next part. I've seen you talk about your vocal 911 kit.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about that and what like a version of it that you would recommend for singers to build for themselves?
Yeah.
Because they're probably not quite the same.
Yeah, probably not. But I mean, all of this is listed on my website. If you go to mindypack.com, there's a store section in there, and they're just like links that you can see on things that I do. But the 3 things that if you are going to invest in anything, I would say the voice draw being one of them. The second one is some sort of nebulizer. And a nebulizer is different than a humidifier and a steamer.
We'll come back to that in a sec because that's a really important distinction that a lot of people do not understand.
Yeah. So a nebulizer for sure is another one. And then the third thing that I highly recommend is you need to get with a voice doctor, whether that's Rena Gupta in LA who does this, or talk to your other doctor, where before you go out on the road or before you start a busy season, you get a physical checkup, the state of your health of your vocal cords, and you ask for a medical kit that can transfer with you. So a small med bag that pertains to your own health. So whether that's the antibiotics if you start getting sick, if you need a little low dose of steroid, if you need a nasal spray for allergies based on where you're going, to have a little med bag that pertains to you, because a lot of times when you go or you're in a crisis, you go to urgent care and they're just going to throw everything at you, and they're going to throw a major high steroid at you to try and get it to be done. And that's not the healthiest way to do that. So those 3 things, the straw, your nebulizer, and then your med bag would be the 3. And then I love, if I needed any certain lozenges, I love the vocal zones for a cool down. For immunity help, I love the doTERRA On Guards that I can go in for immunity, or their Breathe for respiratory. So those are kind of the 3 lozenges that I take with us everywhere we go. If I was going to do just like a general.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if this is a question you can answer or not. So
feel
free to say no if you can't.
Okay.
But I'm curious about you talked about the dosage of steroids. So I know that you are not a medical doctor and you cannot recommend a dosage. I know that when I have been given steroids for my voice, it has been what I would consider a high dose for a short course. So like a 50 milligrams a day for 3 days or something like that. I'm assuming when you're saying low dose, you are talking about something that is not as high as that. So my question is, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but what kind of range are you talking about?
Well, they come in all sorts of ranges.
Yeah.
Like you can get as low as a 2 milligram pill.
Yeah.
You can get up to a 50 milligram pill, I guess. I've never heard one of that big. So again, that's going to come into your doctor. Yeah. But when you take that's that conversation. If you are an average steroid user where you're like, I have to have this go through, there are ramifications for taking steroids, and that it depletes your autoimmune system, and it can have some very catastrophic effects if you abuse the steroid. Yeah. And so that's where really having a conversation with a laryngologist. Laryngologist is not just an ENT. It is someone who is specialized in the voice. And you can do a telehealth with, if you don't have someone in your area, do a telehealth with somebody who understands the voice to make sure that everything's in the right way. So I would say, you can have a small dose, you can have a large dose. It's dependent on how you're feeling, what the condition is, what we're dealing with. Are you coughing? Are you not? There's so many varying symptoms that could be in there. And that's why having a laryngologist on your team instead of just a rock doc that doesn't know your history and you get called in, but having an actual voice doctor on your team, I think is one of the most key things that needs to happen for anybody who wants to be considered a professional in this career.
You talked about a nebulizer.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, I think, think that a nebulizer and a steamer are the same thing.
They're not.
They are not. And they both have their place, but for different purposes. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. And that's, if I can caution or just any advice, do research. Don't just watch a YouTube video and be like, okay, this is it. Like, do some due diligence on your part to like go through and see what's going to be right for you. A nebulizer breaks down the water particles smaller so that it can transfer into your lungs easier. So anything you inhale passes your vocal cords. So the water particles come down and it actually can hydrate kind of in that area, vocal cords going in. You just want to be careful how much water or how many times you are nebulizing because you're pulling liquid down into your lungs. So it's not something that you do all day, every day, unless recommended by a doctor. So you just kind of look at that.
Also, it's saline. So it actually, the salt content, if you're someone with like high blood pressure or whatever, it is part of your salt intake for the day too. So like, again, if you are doing it too many times in a day, that's just a consideration.
Yeah, for sure.
Not one for most people, but
yeah, just talk to your doctor. That's why you have a voice doctor on your team. Yeah. The steamer is one that's more for hydrating your nose and like up like your nose, up inside your sinus and just kind of oral cavity. So if you're like a lip smacker and you're like all the time, like a steamer may work for you. Or if you're like constantly really stuffy and congested, that might work for you so that you can get some drainage. So both of them have very different purposes. So it just depends on which one you want. But a steamer will not hydrate the throat the way a nebulizer will.
The particles are too big to get down to your vocal folds.
Yeah. And it's years and lots of research and studies on that with different nebulizers and all of that. So you just want to look at, like what that is that you're doing.
Yeah. What are the most common misconceptions that you encounter about vocal health in your work?
About vocal health?
Well, vocal health, vocal stamina, the voice.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess when you're on stage and you are putting on a 90-minute set, depending on how much energy output you're doing, you're literally at a gym you're like doing a cardio run for at least, I don't know, an hour or something like that. Certain things, I remember we put a pedometer on one of the artists I was working with, and every show that they were doing, it was equivalent to about 15 miles just in the show. So to have an expectation that you don't have to match a physical endurance to meet the vocal demand is crazy to me. Like you have to be able to vocal pace your set to keep the endurance level up, or that's, again, you're going to run into issues. So even if you have a 30-minute set, how do you maintain that? And, I talk about this with the party band. I'm like, do you rehearse for your 4 hours that you have up there? Like, are you literally training to be able to do that? Even if it's 3 songs, like, are you keeping that pace up there? Because you typically have 3 back-to-backs, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, is usually the weekend of the run. So I would say that's a misconception, is that I can just get up there and do it without truly pacing. A physical activity around that is a big one. The other misconception is I just think the fear around injury, and going through, like, I wish we could take that stigma away. I told you earlier that there's really not a lot that we can't come back from. So if you do get injured, like, find somebody that can help guide you through that, both mentally and in the actual rehab process. Because unless they cut that nerve, in some surgery of some point or something like that, there's pretty much, you usually can come back from a lot of it. Might sound different. Yeah. But we can usually bounce back, out of it, depending on what it is. And, I'm a big component on the mental health side of it. like your mental health will have, which we talked about earlier, will probably have an effect on your voice, because our voice as an artist is our way of communicating. It's our passion. We emote out of it. So mentally, if we're stuck, it most likely will have an effect on what we're trying to convey out.
I actually see that so frequently in my voice studio, just the parallels of when people are stuck somewhere in life, it often shows up in a very parallel way where they're stuck in their voice.
Yeah.
Or vice versa, And so I'm not trained in trauma work and stuff. Like I refer out for
100%.
those pieces. I will listen. And then when it gets beyond my scope, I say, and now you need to go see so-and-so.
Yeah.
Which I think is an important piece as well, that everybody know when it's appropriate to go see
know
people.
your scope of work.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. But I see those parallels so often where when something shows up in somebody's voice and I can go internally, I can kind of go, I think that it probably is showing up like this in your life. And sometimes I'll even have those conversations like, yeah, I think those parallels are very, very present for most people. And so having the tools to work through them can be beneficial in both ways, like in your life and in your voice. And how much they affect each other is a thing that I don't think people come into voice work realizing.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and that's, as a body worker too, there's a great book that I love called The Body Keeps a Score. Yeah. Your emotions do get stored in your body at some point, whether it's the voice or somewhere else, it will manifest itself if you don't deal with it. I think we all know that based on what everybody has a trauma of some sort in their life, it will manifest if you don't deal with it. From a bodywork standpoint, if I'm working on a body part, whatever, and we're in there and I can feel it, what are you feeling? How is it there? And most of the time people will just word vomit it out, and I just let them process that, but I do think it's important to have a team structure. I feel very privy to and very lucky to have the team that I have surrounding me when I need it. And I think it's important to have a therapist on call, or just so you can call and refer out to me and hey, I really like this person. They understand this sort of thing. Here's, a number if you want to go through that.
Yeah.
Because I think as a voice coach, we all feel like we're a therapist at some point because of conversations that happen or lyrics that you may hear that somebody wrote. And you're just okay, that's really deep. What is that? And it's not in our scope to help them therapeutically work through that, but we can be there energetically and present. So I just think, that's an important piece.
Yeah, I agree. You have worked with performers, obviously, at the highest level of their craft. So I'm not asking you to name names here, but what are some of the universal traits or practices that you've noticed among the most successful artists?
Work ethic. They are some of the hardest workers ever, because it's not just the tour or what's happening, but from the minute they wake up to the minute they go to bed, somebody's pulling at them. They have to do a million things. They're making, even though they have a huge team, ultimately, they just have this insane work ethic that's going in where they can compartmentalize I have this and this and this and this and this, but then keeping them focused. The other ones that are very successful and that I've seen happen is they have the mentality that it starts at the top and works its way down.
Yeah.
So if the top, which is them, they are the CEO of their brand, they are the CEO of their business. If they're cycling or spinning in a way that isn't there, it will trickle down onto your team. And so just knowing that you are the CEO, it's not your manager, it's not your PR person, it's not this, that you have that control of, the energy of your tour or your performance, just knowing that. I mean, I work with some amazing people, so it's super fun. I also think, yeah, work ethic for sure. Got to be number one. And how you interact with your band really plays a toll on, like get to know your band, get to know like your people and your interaction, because it's only going to make your performance better on that stage when you have that connection, not just like a walk in and walk out type situation. And I think just the overall, I mean, I feel like I'm trying to like be vague here, but I feel like when I come in to coach, like I treat them as a human.
Yeah.
You put your clothes on the same way I put my clothes on.
Yeah.
You go to a house that I go to a house. You just may have a lot more zeros in your bank account than what I have. That truly is the difference here, in some ways. And so for me, it's like, I like to humble a little bit on certain things and go through, but just like also like for me, it's just figuring out like how they work, because everybody's different and the scale that we have. But I think for the big thing is your work ethic and knowing that you are the one that controls the decisions. And you need to make sure that people on your team, like you respect it and you respect their opinion in that, but they also need to respect you at the same time. So, I mean, there's a lot. That could be a whole other podcast, like going down into it. But yeah, work ethic. Like they didn't get there by being lazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And expecting somebody else to do it for them.
Yeah.
Like I'm telling you, record labels are not looking to sign somebody like that doesn't have a social media following, that doesn't have any of this. Like they want somebody that's already developed and has the hustle and like all of this stuff.
Proof of concept.
100%. Like there's just not the funding anymore to develop an artist, and so, like not that you have to like carry everything, but you have to be able to know that this is what's happening. I'm like, this is my vision. This is where it's going to go. Like there is a work ethic and hustle that still happens.
Yeah.
Even at the highest level.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about the Svara project.
Yeah.
It's a collaborative initiative with Dr. Reena Gupta. You want to share a little bit about the mission behind it and the impact you're hoping it'll have on the vocal community?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure you have too. Like we've been involved in organizations and conferences, and sometimes they can be a little pretentious going through it. And, when the thing that I love about Reena is when I first met her, she is a singer herself. And she's one of the top doctors in Beverly Hills. Her patient care and bedside manner is by far one of the best that, I've ever seen on stuff. And it took us a minute to I've known her for many, many years for us to like really form and like kind of what we're doing. But we noticed I was holding other conferences for essentially voice teachers to go in and like learn through different organizations. I was in charge of doing that. She was putting on these vocal master classes in LA where we realized that singers there wasn't really a conference for singers to go to that was like, here's education. This is how your voice works.
Yeah.
And a community of like networking, but also like, if I need help, how do I get answers? Or like here, like, cause there's such fear around an injury or am I doing this right or whatever. And so when we started working together, I started like helping her put content together for vocal masterclass. We just kind of started going through like, what if we kind of developed our own thing that was for a community of voice users. So like voice actors and all of that. And that's kind of how the Svara project came about. Svara in Sanskrit means the stepping stone. It's a stepping stone, of evolution essentially. And so when we started putting it together, it was kind of all these pieces of community. Like our big focus was we have a safe space for community to come together to actually get up-to-date real knowledge on what is with the voice. And it's been amazing. We've held, prior to the pandemic, we held these conferences in LA and we had people from all over the world who came in. And then, COVID happened. So then we did it online and it opened up even more globally. We just did a huge conference in Australia this year. And so for us, it's just more, it's not about a membership or a teaching organization or anything pretentious. It was more of just being a collaborative community where it was a safe space for people who love the voice can come together and learn. And so, it's something that she and I are both very, very passionate about. If you've seen my Instagram and that, like, I'm all about education and like being very open to conversation and things like that. And she is too. So it's just fun to have that together. So,
well, and one of the things that I'm very appreciative of with the content that you put out and the focus of what you're doing. And I think for so long, all of the education that was available both to voice educators and to singers was all based in classical music.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very, a fairly recent transition that there's starting to be more available in the world of contemporary music, and an even more recent addition that there's some that's available in the world of contemporary music that isn't just Broadway.
Preach. Yes, because the mechanics of singing classical are very different.
Yes, they are.
Than contemporary music. And that is a soapbox for me with artists, is like, you cannot train classically if you are a contemporary singer. And I will die on that hill. Having sung both methods, like, it's totally different, amplified, unamplified. The way your larynx sits is different in classical music than in contemporary music, and there's a bunch of studies on that. And so for contemporary singers, it's like, study with somebody who understands contemporary. Like, you have to do it. And with technology now, there's no excuse where you cannot have that option. I've talked to Ingo about it too, like going through, just from the studies. And I think that was what was available at the time, because that's what academic was.
Yeah.
Academic was, a lot of the times over the years, was just classical and opera training, bel canto, like all of that.
Yeah.
And it was these, I call it the trade schools, essentially, of voice teaching. That was more of the contemporary side that started busting their way into other things, like with Joe Estill and Seth Riggs and, the Zen of Screaming, Melissa Cross and like all these, people who
Catherine
really
Saddlin and
that just started kind of like beating down the door on certain things. And now in research, like with what Carrie Obert's doing and Shannon Coates, like all these people in Howell, like just from an acoustic setting, things are starting to change in a great way. I mean, I still feel like it's like the Revolutionary War sometimes, where it's like we're fighting against each other, and essentially the voice is one, and it's unique, and there shouldn't be this big of diversity coming through. But it is a soapbox that I've had on being like, hey, this is how it's working, and this is how I work, which may not work for everybody. But this is, like what my background and training has been into the contemporary side, and this is how it works. And I try and make it relatable. Like reading a science paper is not fun, like, and dissecting it. So how do we take that and regurgitate it so that it can be general information for everybody to process?
Yeah. Yeah. Because that is weighty material to try and work through. and like, you actually have to know how to read a science paper, and most of us don't.
Well, and you need to understand what the terminology is for the person writing it. It's like a standard question on what is mix. What's mixed voice? I freaking hate that question more than not. And I always go by how Dr. Tietze explains it, versus like what it is. And so, but if you listen to somebody talk about it, what is their perception of it versus what's this? You have to understand where that person's coming from in order to be able to understand the meaning behind, like what it is. So
that's one of the things in the voice pedagogy world, at least, that is challenging, is that we don't have like standardized terminology even.
Yeah.
Is it chest voice, or is it M1, or is it, there's like all these different terms that mean the same thing. Is it a chest mix, or is it a head mix, or is it an M2, or is it there's, and I know there's other terminology for those things as well that I'm just not as familiar with, but there's all these different terms, and so people come into it and like nobody's even speaking the same language.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the solution for that is. I just know that it is one more thing that makes it challenging.
Yeah, I think that's where people like different organizations, again, are trying to do some sort of standardizing, but sometimes that standardizing limits who can go in and get that information.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how that's going to be regulated, because I think, people have different opinions. So that's where it's like, I just suggest, like, do your research, figure out where that means, like, what is M1, M2? And for me, that's something that's very big over in the UK and how they teach and go through. So I've had situations where I've just reached out to the author and I've been like, can you explain this? Or can I book a consult with you so I can understand what you're talking about? This is my understanding, but I don't know if it's matching with that.
Yeah.
And so I pay for a session to like pick their brain. Sometimes they're like, yeah, let's just meet and like do it because they want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And go through. And then that way, for me, like when I go stand on a stage and present, I know, like, okay, this was my understanding. It may not be perfect, but this is my understanding. Do your research. It's the same thing on YouTube videos. Like, I freaking hate which I've done before, the voice teacher react videos and like things. I literally, if I could stab my eye with an icicle, I would stab my eyeball. I hate them that much because people are commenting on a voice that they literally do not know anything about. There's a certain video of an artist that I was working with who was running on a treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the video. They don't say my name, but you can see us rehearsing. There's a voice teacher react video that has millions of views to that video. And they're like, the voice teacher is doing it for this reason. And literally lists out these reasons on why I was doing this with the artist, and they were wrong. Mm. And I'm just like so annoyed because I can't go on and be like, that's wrong. But it just is like, everybody's like, this is so great. This is so great. I got to start doing it. I'm like, you're going to hurt yourself if you just start doing it that way. Mm-hmm. So, just do your research and then hit the people up that actually know the reason behind it. And most of the time they'll probably tell you.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There was a soapbox for you.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I also think those voice teacher react videos, like, they can be so detrimental because the people commenting don't have any idea what the artist was intending, what they were working on, like, they don't know any of what was going into it. If it was a choice, an intentional choice to do something one way that they're being torn apart for, or maybe
they had to because they physically couldn't do it the other way. And I can tell you right now, if you do voice teacher reacts, you will never be hired by an artist. I've been on the bus. I have been in the green rooms. I have been everywhere where we are seeing the voice teacher react videos, and you are not making an artist feel safe by judging them and critiquing them. I can guarantee you will not be working with an artist at that caliber or going in to work with whatever. And the other thing that I hate too is there's, the people that are working with A-list artists, go watch their stuff. They aren't posting about their artists. Mm-hmm. They're keeping it kind of locked in, because we may have NDAs that don't allow us to.
Right.
But it's a space where we are not exploiting the artists of who we're working with unless we're allowed to share certain things. There's coaches out there who are looking at popular singers who say have been on The Voice or been on the Canadian Voice or Canada's Got Talent or whatever. And these teachers are pulling these clients from other coaches because they have the Instagram fame or whatever. Yeah. And they're claiming them as their own coach because they're coming in for views. Research like who that person's coach is and ask them how they got him there, or study with that coach. Like, just because it's on social media doesn't mean that's the truth. Yeah. And so you just need to like dig in and just see like what that is. If you're truly trying to learn about a specific person that you're watching about or what their journey is.
Yeah.
Be smart.
Can we talk a little bit about the endurance training piece?
Yeah.
So that is a thing. I mean, I have never been side by side with my artists while they're on a treadmill and making them sing, but I have talked to them about, okay, you are now starting to perform live. And when you perform live, you move around the stage a whole lot. You need to not be just practicing in your bedroom or just practicing in a rehearsal space with no movement. You need to increase your cardio endurance. So you just need to simply increase your cardio endurance, and then you need to add making sound into your cardio. So we need to like stepping stone that piece to it. And I know that is a thing that you work with your clients.
Yeah. No, I have a vocal gym that I bring people in and we start doing it depending on what's happening, or we put it together. So my process is, it's unique to like whatever we're going to try and do and how long the set is and all of that. But first and foremost, I will always start with foundation. So like getting the voice to work the way it needs to go and working on individual songs. Yes. So like a lot of times people are like, I'm going to go now all of a sudden jump on a treadmill or bike and do a 2-hour run. No, that's not how it works. How I typically do it is, okay, we have our set list and I usually will say, pick your 3 hardest songs. Like and usually it will be, I want 2 high endurance ones that are like either fast paced BPM and a ballad, so that we have kind of a way to go through it. Once we vocally go through those 3 songs and it's pretty much locked in, then I figure out like what is the cardio routine that they like. And then we just start kind of pacing that together without the vocal. So it's like, can you pace that without it? There's a transpose plugin on Google that I freaking love. And I can change the speed and I can change the pitch and I can change the tempo on it so that we can, with any YouTube video that's on there. And I can change that so that we can slow it down. We can elevate it, like whatever we want, just so we can start going together. And then slowly we just start adding in the tracks. But like, I hate running. Like, I hate it so freaking much. And it gets so mundane. So it's like trying to be creative in different spaces. So are we going to go outside? Do you want to swim laps with it? Do you want to do a bike? Do you want to do, jazzercise on a YouTube video? Like, which one of the plugins that I like is we can do like if we want to change it up and do a Richard Simmons jazzercise like thing, I can speed up the tempo of it to match like songs that are going in there. So it's fun. And we can go, is it a dance class? I don't know. Like you just have to figure out what's unique for you and like what will keep you motivated to do it in order to build up kind of the stamina with it. And sometimes I'm at the gym with them. Sometimes they're in my vocal gym and I'm just sitting on a chair yelling at them while I'm drinking a Diet Dr. Pepper because I ain't running with them. I'll tell you that like right now. Other times like we'll go to the track and like I'll have them run around the track and I just, again, yell at them with a megaphone to be like, you can do it, going through. So it's all about kind of finding out like what that pace is. And you can't expect yourself to do a 45-minute set if you physically can't walk a 45-minute set. Right. It's just not. You're going to compensate and you're going to end up in trouble. Yeah. So, and that's like the common thing, like I'll have somebody like, I had an hour set, man, last night, my voice is rough. And I was like, okay, so what did you do to prepare for that? Did you prepare, like, did you build up that endurance for an hour? It doesn't matter. Like, did you vocally warm up for an hour? Like, can you do it? Did you physically get your body in a state where you can do the endurance for an hour? Well, then, here's the reaction for that. Every cause has a reaction. So, if you want to be considered a professional, you have to train as a professional. You just can't just go in and just do it. And that's the difference. That's the difference between people who make it and people who are not making it, is that you got to put in the work. Yeah.
And there again, I think until you get to the point where you're doing it, you don't understand the physical demands of doing it. Not just the vocal demands, the physical demands.
Yeah. And like, think about it for a second. Like when you have somebody we'll talk musical theater here for a minute. When you're in that rehearsal process, you're rehearsing for months to make the show. So you are like, the first time you run a show, you're probably beat. Like going into it. Like I remember when I was playing Ursula, she doesn't really do karaoke. She doesn't do choreography. Yeah. I roll around in a little cage, and do whatever. But I'm still on the stage and I still energetically have to be that character with the amount of energy and effort that's going into it. So throughout that 4-month period, I was building up that endurance to create that space. A lot of pop artists do not build up that endurance to go out on a 30, 45 hour set. So you have to build up that same endurance to do it. Otherwise, you're going to be, I'm hoarse today. Well, no shit.
Yeah.
You what did you do to go into that? So I think it's just changing that mindset that it's easy and it's just going in there because you're dealing with your body. Like it will catch up to you.
Yeah. What are some key principles or habits that singers at any level can adopt to improve their sort of vocal resilience?
Habits. Okay. Sleep is number one.
Mm-hmm.
You have to sleep. Hydration is going to be the other one. Making sure, you're staying hydrated. For me, I feel like it's like the how do you say it? It's the controversy of a warm up. Do you have to warm up for a specific amount of time? My response is no, but you do have to warm up. When your when your voice is warm, you're done. You don't have to oversing outside of that. So I get a lot of questions of like, if I do a 30-minute warm up, no, I would rather you do a warm up when you feel warm and then recalibrate 2 hours later and do it throughout the day versus just, I have this amount of time, so I'm going to do 30 minutes.
Amen.
A cool down for me is the creme de la creme, because you're going out and doing all these vocal athletics and calibrating and doing all sorts of different manipulations inside your vocal tract, doing a quick 2-minute cool down at the end of your day to like put you back into neutral is going to set you up for success the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Also knowing, we could get smoking, just don't do it. Smoking, vaping, anything you inhale, it's like the worst thing you could do as a singer. Mm-hmm. So I don't if you need something, eat it, oil it, whatever. Yeah. But the vaping, don't do it. Smoking for sure. If you are a drinker and you like the alcohol, knowing how do I say it the right way? Like if you're going to drink a beer, how do you, counteract that with water? So just knowing kind of how that works. And then even from your diet, what do you eat pre-show? What do you eat post-show? And knowing what foods work for your body to fuel it versus just the easy, I'm going to slam pizza and spaghetti afterwards. And then you have reflux going through. So,
well, not to mention I had a really interesting conversation with a client the other day who said, I realized, I overate just before our session today, and it's hard to sing. And I said, well, you physically have less room to breathe. If you are over full, you don't have as much room in your torso to expand because your stomach is taking up that space right now. So there's considering what you eat before a show is, not just the kind of food that you eat, but also kind of how much you eat, enough to fuel you appropriately, because you also want to have enough energy to get through your show, but not enough to slow your body down or make it hard to do your job either. There's a balance.
Yeah. And everybody's different. So
totally.
Some people need the protein, some people need the carbs, some people need this. So knowing what it is to do, so if you have a show at 8:30, you're going to eat at 5:30 to fuel it. And then you'll have something right when you get off stage. But what is it so that you have time to digest it before you go to bed? And there's lots of great resources out there to figure out what food type is right for your body, how you can eliminate certain things, the standard thing of don't do dairy. That does not work on me. I could eat ice cream the 2 minutes before I walk out on stage and I will be fine. But if you give me a lemon, I'm done.
Agreed.
I cannot do lemon before I sing because I will reflux like crazy and burp like nobody's business.
It dries me out.
Yeah.
But I can have lemon oil in my water, but I can't have lemon juice. A squeezed lemon will dry me out like nothing.
Yeah. So, yeah. And that's where it's you got to know your body and not just do a blanket statement for everybody.
And the funny thing is, I mean, how many years did I tell students no dairy? Because but the research has changed. Dairy, provided you're not allergic to it or whatever, and with the caveat that you got to know your body because everybody's different. But the research is that dairy is actually more hydrating than water because you absorb the liquid more slowly, whereas water just goes through you quickly.
Yeah. It's your body may get more phlegmy. I don't know.
Right.
But that's where
you have to know your body
and talk to your doctor. Like, okay, am I going to do an elimination diet or whatever to figure out what that works, or pull your blood to see what works and like go through it. So it just depends. I mean, there's so much to think about and it can be like really overwhelming. So that's why, I feel having somebody on your team that can help you navigate that is pretty important to help kind of go through that checklist, depending on how much you want to get into it.
Yeah.
Some people are like, I don't care. I don't want to do it. Maybe you're in your 20s. This doesn't matter to you right now.
Yeah.
As you age, it will start to matter to you if you want to stay in the career. So it just kind of depends on where that sits.
So if thinking about speaking to people who are in the sort of up and coming part of their career, emerging artists, who are maybe looking at going out on a tour for a first time.
Correct. Yeah.
What are the kind of habits that we have to behave differently on tour because we can't do the things we do in everyday life and expect our voices to carry us through 3-week or 3-month or 6-month tour.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't work that way. So what are some things that you would say to an emerging artist who's looking at that for the first time, things that they are going to want to consider for their voice to keep it healthy through that time?
Yeah. So first thing I would say is a lot of times first tours, I call it leading man syndrome, where they feel like they have to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you may have to. Sometimes it may just be you and you're like going through it. So getting on a schedule is pivotal. Like you have to get on a schedule that your body can start going through. If you have the ability with your band to have them help you, do it. Because a lot of times, like being the front person, they feel like they have to take on that load of responsibility. They have to drive, they have to load in, they have to load out, they have to do everything. You may have to. If that's it, give yourself time to get there, to prepare and be able to rest.
Yeah.
And go through, because the sleep is going to be like the main thing, especially if you're on a tour bus. Like the sleep cycle is very different than being in a hotel, or maybe you're driving in a van, and going through there. Like, I will say this till I'm blue in the face. Your guitar player is not going to have the same ramifications you will if your voice goes out. You have got to make sure that you sleep, and whatever that schedule is needs to be a conversation with your band or your management or whoever. So schedule and sleep would be the first thing, and like delegating responsibility. So like everything isn't all on them. Always be on time. Do not be late. Your reputation around that is going to determine if you stay out with that artist, if you're opening for them, or your fans, all of that. So being punctual, on time for calls, don't be late for sound checks, like be there and be present. The attitude that you have with everybody is going to be pivotal. People are going to decide if they want to work with you or not. And it is such a small world in the music world.
Yes.
That your reputation is going to go very fast.
And it sticks with you for a long time.
Yeah. You can't like get rid of it. So, like just be kind and courteous. Even in the venue space that you're in. I remember I was with one artist, and it kind of changed how I was in a venue. But I was with an artist and we were getting ready to walk out for sound check. And it was like the first time I'd been with them. So I'm just kind of like watching the navigation of how things kind of work, because every team operates differently. And this artist, and it was a big artist. This artist came out from the dressing room and they were like, do you want to walk the arena with me? And I was like, is kind of weird why we walk in the arena. That really doesn't happen usually. It's like out of the room onto stage. And this artist walked around and personally thanked every person that they came up to in the arena that wasn't part of their team. And so like, cause like the security guards in their venue, they like typically don't stare at the artist, don't talk to the artist, like mum's the word and you just have to be there and like do whatever. But this artist went over and was like, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here. And like the energy of that venue, every time they did that changed. And you just saw like, oh, I got acknowledged. You know, like it was like really pivotal for me to see that. And so like I make it a point every time like, hey, how are you? It's so nice to see you. And it's like it transfers. So like as an artist coming in or that, like just know that your kindness can change the entire energy and direction of what that venue is going to be for you.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I would say your attitude, even though, because it's Groundhog's Day, like people think it's like a glamorous life. It is Groundhog's Day. Like there's like every day we're like, you're in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Like we are literally like yelling that in the ear to like know that that's where we're at, you know? And so, you know, it can get daunting. And then the other thing is just find fun. Yeah. Like find things to do so you're just not stuck in a hotel venue bus. Like be able to get out and like the gratitude that you have to be able to do what you're doing goes a long way, you know, because it can get really monotonous.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Do you have any advice for artists who, you know, when they have to do like, in terms of voice management, who have to do the VIP meet and greets before or after the show, and maybe they're still working their own merch table.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of having to like talk.
Yep.
And possibly talk over a high degree of ambient noise, as well as sing their show. Yep.
So ambient noise for me is like the big one, because a lot of times we sing I call it the performance speech, where we're like, oh my gosh, how are you? And we like start talking higher and louder. And so I recommend getting an earplug of some sort. I love the loop ones because it looks like a piece of jewelry and it doesn't look like an actual swimmer's earplug.
Yeah.
But that's going to give you a biofeedback of how hard you're actually talking in an ambient space with noise. And so it will usually cater down. I'll always tell people, like, if you're talking, to start with a So like if somebody asks me a question like, I'm so glad you're here today, be like, I'm so glad you're here today too. This is so fun. And kind of do it quiet, because that resets us into an optimum pitch instead of higher, or I'm talking down here, I'm trying to whisper, you know, because whispering we know is not the best.
Yeah.
So that's so great that you're here. I love that, you know. And a lot of times people just want to be acknowledged. Like you don't have to ask them, like you just ask them one question, like, are you excited for the show? I'm so glad you're here today. Like, thank you for taking the time to be here and to support me. Like, I love it. You know, so you're just kind of still talking in a presence, but it's not high or too low. Earplug will give you that. And then I always say, like in a bar setting, have that straw in your cocktail and just that where you're just kind of resetting for 10 seconds. Yeah, all right. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Nobody knows you're doing it.
Yeah, no kidding.
So yeah, I think it's just that resetting, being smart on like what that vocal load is like. Watch your dynamic range on how it is, and then just constantly reset. The reset is really important. So with SOVT, whether it's the straw, lip buzz, raspberry, whatever, I have a knuckle one that I use all the time on stage. So just kind of just seeing where that lands.
I tell clients as well to, you know, if they're whatever, merch table, meet and greet, those kind of things, the more you can ask a short question and let them tell you about themselves, they're going to be so excited to tell you about themselves.
They think you care.
Right.
Like, and maybe you genuinely do.
Right. But it creates great rapport.
Yep.
And you're not the one doing the talking.
Yep.
Set yourself up to do a lot of listening.
Yep.
And as little talking as possible.
Yep. 100%. And have if you have a friend that's with you or management or something like that, have them put a timer so that it's like, okay, next, like going through. So then you're not stuck, in that setting all the time if you need to be. So
Mhm.
I think it's just thinking of like forward thinking strategies
Yeah.
on like what that is. And like there was a time I was out with a client who they did their meet and greet, and that was a VIP experience where they came into the show like to do sound check.
Mhm.
And I realized when they started doing that it was a mini concert before the concert. So the
Mhm.
sound check ended up being like an hour
Yeah.
of like music. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like they're buying an experience for sound check, not a pre-concert. Like that needs to layer out. Like we need it like you're doing like 9 songs. No, my friend, we're doing
Yeah.
4. And then maybe you do like a talk back type thing.
Yeah.
But you're not singing an hour before you do a 2.5 hour set. Like that's ridiculous. So like having, somebody maybe shadow you for the day to actually watch what your demand is to then come up with a strategy, because you probably don't know what
Mhm.
that demand is like going there, and it may be worth it to have somebody come out and just kind of give you a schematics of like what that
Yeah.
is.
And one thing that is occurring to me that I understand it instinctually, and it's absolutely part of what you're talking about, but I think that a lot of artists who are earlier in their careers don't necessarily understand is how beneficial it is to have somebody who helps them come up with the game plan, the strategy. Like it's not just the technical vocal coaching, and it doesn't necessarily have to be your vocal coach that is that
Yeah.
person either, but somebody who is looking at the management of it as a whole process and coming up with this strategy for how to maintain your health, your vocal health, your capacity to perform from start to finish of the tour, from start to finish of the album, from your professional demands, because as the artist, you aren't always the best person to figure out that game plan. You don't always have
100%.
the tools to figure out that game plan.
Yeah, and that's part of the team for
Yeah.
me. That, whether that's a parent
Yeah.
that can help do that, who just loves you unconditionally
Yeah.
and will be your little roadie for life. Maybe that's the parent who can help consult. Maybe that's your manager that needs to understand that. And that's, like from a management standpoint, that's something that I've been very lucky with, to have those relationships where I can be like, this is asinine. Like you cannot expect that to go through. Because remember, if the 2 little vocal cords go out, everything is shut down.
Yep.
So the vocals should, like, that has to be one of the, it doesn't matter this press meet and greet or like you have, like if the voice goes out, you are shut down.
It is priority number 1.
It has to be priority number 1. And if you don't advocate for yourself on that, nobody else will. And so like, that's where you have to get people who are with you, who understand that, because then they'll help advocate what that pacing should look like.
Yeah.
And again, some of the coaches, it may be out of their scope. Totally cool. Like, I mean, I know coaches that are like, I don't not want to do what you do,
Mhm.
because of the pressure and like all of that. Fine. Find somebody who will do that. Maybe that's your SLP. That could be maybe your doctor, if that's who it is, or a trusted friend, manager, your PR person. But you guys got to be on the same page with that can like help watch that and help, keep the habits that are good there,
Yeah.
and like help stray away from some of the bad habits, and you should be able to have people on speed dial that you can call to help navigate it.
Yeah. And I think having that sort of not just a management plan, but also the rescue plan. When something goes sideways,
Because it will.
what are the solutions, or what are the steps you're going to take? Because when you're in the crisis moment, when it feels like a crisis and it's going wrong, being able to think through, what do I do now, when all the fear or anxiety around it is up, we don't always reason through it well then. So having thought through what the steps are ahead of time can be really super useful.
Well, and that's something too that we do with like people that have extreme stage fright.
Yeah.
Is like, when I know someone is going to have, like, they're already a stressed out performer, we will think of worst case scenario. Like, what is it? Okay, so say we're there. What is your worst case scenario? Okay, let's go through that. What happens? What do we do? How do we strategize that so that there's already in our brain a way out of it, so that we don't cycle down this rabbit hole. For me, like going through a worst case scenario, like I I tell anybody, like even my 12-year-old clients, because I don't work with just A-list artists. Like I work with, I have two 12-year-olds in my studio right now when I'm in town. But like, okay, if this happens, what do you do? Like, what is this process? And, I'm like, hey, you call me. You send me a video, like, tell me what's going on at this point. Like we have a strategy, or, okay, you're in New York. I'm not in New York. So who do we reference out there if we need something? So it is important, because what I have found in the industry is that they cannot forward think.
Yeah.
They live in a 48-hour period. Like, this is what I have to do today. We're going to deal with the fires of today. Tomorrow is this.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can't strategically plan 6 months down the road. We want to, like, ideally, as a voice coach sitting here, we're like, I see the fire that's about to start. Yeah. Here we go. And so we have to be able to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's just having that communication, like, okay, if this happens, here's what we're going to do, so that you have it already in place. Because if the artist is cycling where they're like in fear, the fear that like spreads through everybody is very fast. So I always tell everybody, before you tell anybody, you call me first so we can talk it through and have that strategy. And then we'll elaborate out to those who need to know.
Yeah.
Not everybody needs to know. It's a need to know basis if we're like starting to feel something.
Mindy, I have about 800 more questions, and I feel like
let's go.
But I think it would probably be a better use of your time, and if we just have you back on the show another time.
Done and done. Sound said, delivered. I'm yours.
But I am so appreciative of you spending your time with me.
Oh my
today.
gosh, I loved it. I could voice nerd out
right
all day.
Totally.
Like, yeah. So you just tell me when, and I will be here. But
well, we can do it online. But anytime you're back in Vancouver, you let me know too, and we'll just set it up again. Where can people find you online?
So just my name, Mindy Pack, MINDY. Pack.com. That's all my socials as well.
Yeah.
And obviously the voice straw is there. And I set up a specific code for you.
Yay.
So you can put it in your notes for if people want it. They get a little bit of a discount on there too, as being a podcast listener.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'll send that to you. But yeah, feel free to reach out if you guys listening, those who want to reach out to. I love connecting with people, and like educating and just building that community is very important to me. So don't hesitate.
And we have a set of the brand
H2O.
new, the H2O straws that we're going to do a giveaway, but we haven't figured out exactly what that's going to be. So we'll put that out on socials, but
yeah, I'll leave that out to you, however you want to do it to your followers. But yeah, I brought an extra one so you can give it away if you want to.
So we'll coordinate a giveaway with the release of this episode.
Ooh, okay. It's done. Mic drop. Boom.
Thank you so much, Mindy.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, and happy singing.